Item 6.01 is a review item, the Maryland report card data. We have a staff presentation.
Good afternoon, President Hummer, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Alato. We're very thrilled to be here. My name is Jason Dykstra. For the record, I am the Executive Director of the Instructional Data Division here, and I'll allow my esteemed colleague to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Michelle Hall, the Accountability Data Administrator.
So yesterday, the Maryland State Department of Education released the new accountability plan for all schools in Maryland. Prior to this new accountability system, you may recall lots of discussions around No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, AYP, AMO, SPI, and a lot of other acronyms that we've had for a very long time. The biggest difference with this new accountability plan is that the old one was based solely on test scores and whether or not students passed state assessments. That was really essentially it. The plan that Michelle and I will review for you today and provide kind of an overview framework today will show a much more balanced approach to how Maryland's accountability program works. So to help you with that, on the right side of that slide, you will actually see a visual that we will use to try to help you understand. It's a visual of a schoolhouse. It is color coded, and we're going to talk about four general categories with you this afternoon. First, at the foundation of our schoolhouse is school quality. We'll go into how the state defines that in their accountability plan. Next will be school progress, which is moving our students, meeting them where they are and moving them in a positive direction. We're also going to pay special attention to our English language learners and their language development. And ultimately, we want students to perform on those state assessments. So you can see that there's a wide variety of categories compared to prior accountability systems. We're going to do this from the ground up. And so we're gonna build a house, and we're going to take you through a little journey right now. So you may wonder what ESSA is. It's basically the new federal law. It was put into place in late 2015. We started seeing it for the first time in early 2016. States were given about 18 months or so to come up with a plan to get approved. Maryland's accountability plan was ultimately approved by the U.S. Department of Education in January of 18, so actually just really this past winter. So we finally got to start seeing it in the middle of last school year. There's a lot of stuff in it, and Michelle's going to highlight what is in this plan.
As Mr. Dykstra just mentioned, there's multi-measures that you will see in the new accountability system. On the screen, you'll see the graphic of the breakdown of those measures. Many of them are K-12 measures, so every student will be responsible for them. First, there's performance on ELA and math state assessments. Next is the progress of our English language learners in English proficiency. Then we receive credit for students completing a well-rounded curriculum. In the purple, the first line is chronic absenteeism. Having students that are not chronically absent is the goal. The climate survey, which is a survey from MSDE. And finally, the K-12 measure ends with access for all students to a well-rounded curriculum. Elementary and middle schools will also have a component of growth on ELA and math state assessments. And in the high school, that is replaced since the assessment is only given once in high schools. You can't track growth, so instead they have replaced it with graduation rate and on track for 9th grade students.
So what do these indicators look like in our house? So what you see in front of you is a representation of our schoolhouse, and this is for elementary and middle schools. So if you take a look at the purple, the foundation of our schoolhouse, you will see three of the categories Michelle just mentioned. Access to a well-rounded education, which is enrollment, chronic absenteeism, it's students who are absent more than 10%, and then the climate survey, which we'll give for the first time in spring of 2019. That green section is progress. That's the growth that we will hopefully see on our state assessments, and also credit for a well-rounded education, which is where we look for whether students are passing certain classes. We want to see progress with our English language learners around their language acquisition. That's the gray section in the middle of the top of the house. And then ultimately, if things are going well and we have good school quality, we're moving kids, students with language acquisition issues are attaining enough language competence to make sure they can access the content in the curriculum, and ultimately, at the top of the schoolhouse, we get performance on our state assessments. A little bit different for the high school.
As you can see, the percentages have adjusted just a little bit, and that was based on the U.S. Department of Ed requirements. So the only difference besides the percentages is in the green section of the house for high school. That growth component has been replaced by graduation rate and on track for 9th grade.
So what does this report card look like that came out yesterday? We have a snapshot for you. We'll get you more. The websites for the state's been down most of the day. So this is a snapshot, a little hard to read, but we're going to just highlight 3 sections for you. So Ms. Howell's going to help me and click once. So the first thing you're going to notice is an overall percentage. So that is simply a school's points earned over points possible. So how many points did they earn in all of those rooms that were available over the points possible, simple division, and we'll get a percent. That percent leads you to the star rating. So the star rating, which we'll explain on the next slide, really represent what percent of the points you earned in this accountability plan. And last but certainly not least is the percentile rank. So in this particular, this is an actual one of our schools. So in this actual example, this elementary school performed better than 28% of the elementary schools in Maryland. So those are the 3 kind of key items. The rest of the report card goes into great detail with each room and shows you specifically where schools earned points in each of those rooms.
So we were originally told that the star ranking would be determined by the State Board of Ed and would include things like performance, growth, equity, and meeting annual targets. Recently, within the past several weeks, they have determined that the star ratings will be strictly awarded on the total points earned. So your total earned percent will afford you the points that you can, the stars, that you can see on the screen above.
So what does that look like for AACPS? So here is a current breakdown of where our schools fall with the star rating system. As you can see, the majority of our schools fall in the 3-star column. We have very few 1-star and 5-star schools, and the remaining schools are somewhat equally split then between 2-star and 4-star schools.
So looking at the overall stars and the overall components of the program, big wins for AACPS. First, as was just demonstrated by the Curriculum and Instruction Division, we have a very well-rounded curriculum. So the middle school access to well-rounded curriculum was an area where AACPS excelled. AACPS already has several measures in place for students to attain credit in our middle and high school for that well-rounded curriculum. High school graduation rate is also a big win for AACPS as it continues to improve. And almost in foresight, we implemented several years ago the high school intentional focus, which was moving students from 9th to 10th grade. Aligns very, very well and has provided us a big win in moving our kids to make sure they are on track in 9th grade.
In this first report card, our elementary schools will not receive 15 points in 2 of the rooms in our house due to the 5th grade health requirement in those rooms. Those 2 rooms are access to a well-rounded education and credit for a well-rounded education or curriculum. In 17-18, which was the prior school year that this data is based on, our health standards were infused and spread out through multiple content areas, multiple curriculums, and taught by multiple teachers. In addition, grades were not necessarily collected on specific health standards last year, the 17-18 school year. Since the Maryland Accountability Plan was approved and released in the middle of last school year, we were not able to accurately report the health course information for our 5th grade students to the state for the 17-18 school year. We've immediately addressed this situation with our friends and partners in curriculum and instruction, and we will be able to report all health course information to the state this year for all of our 5th graders. So you might be wondering, well, how would this potentially impact our report cards? So let's take a look at that for a second. So what you'll immediately notice is that almost all of our schools move up at least 1 star, and some of our schools would actually move up 2 stars from the prior slide that I showed earlier with what our current status is. The majority of our schools would be 4-star schools. We dramatically increase our 5-star schools, and the remainder of our schools, with the exception of 2, would be 3-star schools. So the health being reported next year for our elementary schools is going to be a significant player in our report card and accountability system next year. We also need to remember that our elementary schools will get points for their survey next year. All of our schools will, in fact. And also the new science assessment will be included in report cards for next year. So there's some other opportunities for our schools to earn points.
So we have lived in this world for quite a while. Everyone else has not. So we want to ensure that there are resources out there for you, for the community, and for principals to use when they're having conversations with their parents and the community. So we have implemented an AACPS website that will be the host for all AACPS information. Some of it we have taken directly from the state. Others we're taking from the state and making it a little bit more parent and community friendly so that they can understand where we stand as a district. This PowerPoint, along with a PowerPoint that we're going to provide for staff and community use in the schools, will be on there. The house graphic that you have seen has been something that we have used since we have begun this rollout of ESSA and the strategic plan. And the principals in the schools are very used to seeing the house graphic. We're going to provide them with a graphic for the individual rooms with the points that they earned in each room so they can see locations in the house where they may or may not have earned points that they would consider sufficient. We're going to put out an FAQ and key talking points for schools so that that can be referenced as they get questions, as I'm sure they will. And then we do a couple different reports from the Instructional Data Division. One will be a summary and comparison report that comes out that will compare Anne Arundel schools, but also Anne Arundel schools compared to the state. And then we will also provide schools with the student level data when it is released. It has not been released yet. So they can target individual students who potentially are not making the growth that they would like them to see and learn from that individual data which students counted for which rooms of the house.
So thank you for this opportunity to kind of give you kind of a high-level overview and framework of the new accountability system and the new Maryland report cards for all of our schools. We're just beginning this journey. This is year 1. This is baseline data. This is a 12-year journey. ESSA is a 13-year plan. We're in year 1, so we have 12 more to go. And we're excited about it. The great news is that 75% of our schools are 3 stars and higher, and we already know that with the health curriculum being aligned and reportable, that we will see great increases next year with all of our schools. The equally great news is that the timing of this new accountability plan and report card aligns perfectly with our strategic plan. So our schools are actually really excited about the work ahead. We've had the opportunity this afternoon to highlight some of the rooms in the house for you, and they just really do align very well. We've talked about the rooms in school quality. We've talked about the rooms in school progress and performance. When we look at school quality, we see all means all. And when we look at school progress and performance, we see ready, set, launch. And so our schools are already engaged in the meaningful work for our students, our teachers, and our community. They are already putting the strategic plan in motion. And there is just no doubt that the school improvement plans that they have already designed and are already implementing are going to move us in a wonderfully positive direction. With that, we will take any questions that you have.
So I just want to share that I served on the ad hoc ESSA committee for the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, and we gave a lot of input into the formulation of this from the school perspective. There's some things about this I really like. There's some things I feel are missing. I don't think it shows enough it gives enough credit to our schools that are making really good progress. You know, so we have some schools that may be performing low on the star set, but when you look at their growth over the years, it's still significant for what they're doing, and there's not enough in there. I don't think it addresses equity enough. That comes in. Those are all things that are real focus for us here, and that's we're hearing from other state boards, other school boards around the state too. And so perhaps that'll be something tweaked. I'm concerned, as I know everyone is, that a portion of this is performance on state tests, which are going away after this year, and we'll get something new, and that will totally change the baseline and what comes up and how we'll come with that. I do want to share for the other board members to know that the 5th grade health issue that came up, 14 out of the 24 school districts had that same issue within their system, that rather than a standalone health course for 5th grade, it was embedded throughout the curriculum. And so there's 14 other districts that are also coming with that. I wish that the state had waited to roll it out when they had all the elements in place, because it's a total of 100 points. And right now there's only 85 because they have not, despite many promises, the climate survey and things have not come out yet. So that will be a real impact when those come out. I have a question for y'all about one of the accountabilities is for our English language learners and their percentage. We have some schools that really don't have English language learners. And so what do they receive for points in that category if there's no population?
Great question, Ms. Hummer. Just like where the state did not put in points possible for the survey because it wasn't available, those schools that don't have enough students or English language learners in their school, those points are just not possible, so they changed their denominator.
And so what's the threshold for number of students?
10.
That's what I thought, 10. So if they have less than 10 ELL students, they just don't have that. Okay, thank you. Ms. Antoine.
Thank you. So, to the naked eye, 56% is still failure, right? Are we setting a targeted goal for next time that will get us way above that 56%, let's say projecting towards maybe even 75?
Great question, Ms. Antoine. All schools, certainly when I was a principal, we really focus on continuous improvement, right? So this is baseline. This is where we're starting the ESSA journey. The ESSA journey is a small part of our strategic plan journey, where we really want to make sure that we're moving all kids, all means all, right? And we want to move all kids in a positive direction. So the goal would be improvement over time. We're going to see a nice bump because of the inclusion of the health points for our elementary schools. Based on the fact that we've given a climate survey in this district for the last 5 years, we know that the vast majority of our schools are perceived as very positive, which is going to also increase points for our schools and give a little bit more of a complete picture of our schools. Not sure what to expect with the science assessment. It's a tough test. It's integrated, meaning it covers multiple years of standards. So we'll have to see how that one plays out. But most schools approach their school improvement planning process with the lens of continuous improvement. Where are we, and where can we realistically get this year? Where are we now at the end of this year? Where can we realistically get the following year?
So, can you put that in maybe a quantitative kind of figure?
Sure. My goal in supporting schools, I don't want Anne Arundel County to have any less than a 4 or 5 star school. And I want that as soon as possible. And my team will support schools to make that happen any way we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Corkadell.
It wasn't clear to me with the objective of the program and, of the rating is of what the funding impact may be as it relates to state and federal programs. Is there going to be, is there a magic date where we run into consequences, or is this a way for us to self-improve? I wasn't clear on that in my findings thus far.
No, Ms. Corkadell, great question. That's probably where the accountability program is maybe most similar. So it's the latter. It's for schools to self-improve, working in partnerships with their communities and their students and their teachers and their parents and everybody else. There are schools that are required by law to be identified for support. There is targeted support and comprehensive support that is typically reserved for the bottom 1 to 5% of schools, and those schools then do have to submit a plan to the state that we approve, and additional resources at that point are sent that direction.
So it almost sounds like it may open up new opportunities for some of our couple schools that were sitting in the back there to receive in the ways I'm thinking. Of course, facility is the largest impact on budget, or additional teacher support, aid support as appropriate. I saw some of the schools of address some of our most challenged students in that mix. So
Yes.
is that correct?
Correct. We look at it from every angle. Correct. We look at it from every angle on how we can better support kids, where are our strengths, because every school has strengths, and where are we not meeting the mark, and what type of resources would it take then to hit that mark. The two schools that we have identified are special centers and alternative schools, and they're designed to meet the needs of kids who, are struggling in a comprehensive school setting. So we already have additional resources in those facilities to better meet the needs of those students.
But in terms of budget, the state has got a 7% set aside of Title I funds that they collected from all the different jurisdictions to hold on to as they release this. And then as schools are identified in the bottom 5%, the state would then work with locals. As the locals develop a plan to support those schools, we could then basically write for grant funding. I'm using the term loosely, but they have a 7% set aside from all Title I funds statewide that then school systems that have schools in the lowest 5% could then access to implement their plans of improvement.
And just to clarify, that the ones that have identified right now that are in the lowest 5%, they're all in Baltimore City. So ours do not qualify. It's all schools right now that have been identified. Those extra funds are all Baltimore City schools based on the report card that just came out. So, Mr. Gilliland.
Thank you, Madam President. Two questions. One is, Bubba, thank you again for this, and I love the house pictures. The performance versus progress, or performance versus growth, are you seeing any trends that indicate that it's a double hit for us if we're low in one, we're low in the other? Or are you seeing that we may be low on performance, but yet we're having significant growth?
It's that one.
Okay.
Yep, we're doing a very nice job as Park has evolved. We are getting a new assessment, the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, MCAP. As we've evolved, we are seeing growth pretty much across the board in just about every school, which is exciting because it's not an easy test, as this board knows, and any student who's taken the test knows. Where we still are struggling is hitting the 4 and 5. So as you may remember, Park, you get 5 levels of performance. 4 and 5 is the only levels that a school gets credit for on their report card. So give you an example for high school. In high school, the graduation requirement is a level 3 and higher, so there is some confusion around that. So to graduate in Maryland, you need a 3 or higher on English 10 or Algebra 1 for Park. However, any of those students who received a 3 will not count towards your report card. Only level 4 and 5 is considered college and career ready.
And then you just raised it, Mrs. Hummer did as well, MCAP, and what that transition, I care less about the test, and at least in this instance, and more about the transition. So it was almost a given that the first year of Park, maybe even the second year of Park, there's sort of a quasi-pass to the LEAs. And, by the second or third year at the latest, we're going to get it. And then, of course, the State Board and MSDE, new vendor, new partner, and now it's a new test. And it gets frustrating. My concern, I guess it's less of a question, it's more of a concern to express, is that to the extent possible, we can get ahead of MCAP and what those transitions will be. It's my understanding there's a paper pencil option. I'm not sure if that's the case. It's 100% CBT?
That's the plan.
Okay. I hope we've learned from the transition to Park with it being CBT. I fear that now that we've got this report card, and I'm all about the transparency, and certainly above all, I'm all about the accountability aspect of it, but I worry that 2 years from now, there's going to be a lot of scrutiny, not just on us, but on all of the LEAs, that performance has stagnated, or there's going to be something said about the transition, and it looks bad for us to say, well, it's a new test and it's the past year. So I don't know how to get ahead of that. You guys are the experts, but I think it's something we've got to figure out.
Yeah, stay tuned because we have the very same questions that you have. The good news is that we do have access to state meetings. Many of my team and myself sit on committees where we do get firsthand information. At this point, they haven't even selected a vendor yet, so we're really early in the NCAP process.
And do you know, this may be an unfair question at this stage, but, you know, and Dr. Arlotto and I spent a lot of time throughout the spring and summer talking about this on our task force, but is there, well, you were there too, sorry, when you were absent. The bridge, we spent a lot of time talking about the bridge.
Right.
Is that going to be part of MCAP, or is it still too early to know?
My understanding from discussions is that bridge will still be in place as long as MCAP is a graduation requirement. I believe that the only way that bridge would go away is if the State Board of Education obviously made some changes to graduation requirements with regards to testing. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other board questions or comments? Is there any public comment? Thank y'all very much. I know this
Thank
is
you.
a
Thank you.
great work in progress that we're moving toward, and I appreciate all your efforts on that.
Thank you all. It's a lot of work. Thank you.
So